You're listening to Retro Reels, a show that looks back on films from time gone by and recalls the various events, trends, and perspectives that inform their creation. I'm your host, Hanna, here to guide you through a trip to the past via the silver screen. Today I want to talk about a Korean movie that, while definitely creepy and sick and grotesque, doesn't quite fall under the traditional horror category. I have to confess that I really wasn't looking forward to watching this one again, as it contains some very disturbing content. Disturbing enough that it's one of those movies I'd rather just see the one time and never revisit. But being between series this week and this particular movie being kind of horror adjacent, in my opinion, it seems like the most suitable bookend before I get started on the next theme. The movie is called Oldboy, directed by Park Chan-wook, and it came out in 2003. Park Chan-wook is generally considered one of, if not the biggest filmmaker in South Korea today. I happen to have a lot of gay friends, so most of the people around me mainly know him for 2016's The Handmaiden, but at 8 years old, that's a little too current for my program for now. I might make an exception here and there for a 15-year-old movie since that's technically vintage, but I like to keep them over 20 years old for the most part. Conveniently, this exempts me from having to watch the American remake of Oldboy made in 2013 because I'm told it's very, very bad. It really must be because I wasn't even aware anyone had remade it. Ignorance is truly bliss. I'm gonna keep my summary of the plot of Oldboy kind of vague because it's actually a pretty long movie with a lot of little details here and there, but I will include the major twist, which may ruin some people's enjoyment of it. So just be warned if you haven't seen it and you want to, that there are some major spoilers ahead. The movie opens in a police station where you're introduced to main character Oh Dae-soo, who is being detained for being belligerently drunk. His buddy, Ju Hwan, picks him up and they stop at a phone booth, which Dae-soo uses to call his 4-year-old daughter and apologize for missing her birthday. Suddenly, he's kidnapped and imprisoned in a hotel room, where food is delivered through a doggy door, some kind of sleeping gas is vented into the room to sedate him every night, and all he has in the way of entertainment is the TV and some journals he can write in. He learns from watching the news that his wife has been murdered and he has been framed as the main suspect. It doesn't matter though because he ends up stuck in this room for 15 years, kept alive by his captors. He practices martial arts against a wall and busies himself digging an escape tunnel, but just before he has the chance to break out, he is sedated once again and wakes up atop the roof of some building. As he wanders the streets, a random homeless guy approaches Dae-soo and gives him a wallet filled with money and a cell phone. He goes to a sushi restaurant where he meets a young sushi chef named Mi-do. He asks for and then eats a live octopus right in front of her. Dae-soo's captor calls his cell phone to further mess with his mind, and his reaction prompts Mi-do to reach out to comfort him, at which point he passes out on the counter. When Dae-soo wakes up, he's at Mi-do's apartment. He makes an unwanted sexual advance, then feels bad about it and tries to leave, but for some insane reason that you find out later, Mi-do forgives him and teams up with him to try and find his daughter. After learning that she was adopted by a family overseas, he gives up, and he and Mi-do instead work together to solve the mystery of who locked him up for 15 years and why. It turns out the hotel he was imprisoned in is a private prison where people can pay to have someone else incarcerated. He tortures the warden, Mr. Park, who finally tells him the reason given for his imprisonment was simply that he talks too much. His captor, Lee Woo-jin, is some super rich guy who runs a huge conglomerate company called Evergreen. Woo-jin tells Dae-soo that if he can figure out why he locked him up within 5 days' time, he'll kill himself, and if he can't figure it out, he'll kill Mi-do. Racing against the clock now, Dae-soo rushes back to Mi-do's place to find her being accosted by Mr. Park's thugs. He rescues her and they flee her apartment to hide out at a hotel where their relationship deepens, if you know what I mean. Further research with Mi-do and his friend Ju-hwan leads them to their old high school website. Oh-dae-soo looks through some old yearbooks and recalls that he once saw Lee Woo-jin, who was his classmate at the time, commit an act of incest with his own sister, Soo-ah. Because he had told Ju-hwan about witnessing this, rumors spread around the school that Soo-ah was promiscuous, causing her to commit suicide by jumping off a bridge. So that's what was meant by "he talks too much." Having finally figured out why he was locked up, Oh-dae-soo confronts Lee Woo-jin, who confirms that yes, this is the case. Dae-soo thinks he's finally won, until Woo-jin shows him an album of photos of his daughter growing up, and this reveals that his daughter is Mi-do, meaning their romantic relationship is incestuous as well. Woo-jin explains that not only did he lock up Oh-dae-soo to torture him, but he also hired a hypnotist to lead the two of them to each other so that this relationship could develop, and so that he could experience the pain of incest just as he did. Dae-soo breaks down. He debases himself in front of Woo-jin in a desperate attempt to convince him not to tell Mi-do the truth, ultimately cutting off his own tongue as penance. Woo-jin decides this is good enough and ensures that Mi-do does not learn the truth of their relationship. He twists the knife one more time, then makes good on his deal and shoots himself. The last scene of the movie sees Dae-soo seeking out the hypnotist in an attempt to erase his knowledge that Mi-do is his daughter, with dubious results. Music break today is Vivaldi's Winter from his Four Seasons Concerto, which is played while Dae-soo pries out a bunch of Mr. Park's teeth with a hammer. Pretty interesting choice for a torture scene. Oldboy deals with some very unsettling themes and presents them in a way that was, at the time, still uncommonly straightforward. To me, it feels very much like a global extension of that trend of American movies that emerged around the turn of the century, kind of riding the coattails of Quentin Tarantino's first few movies from the 90s, David Fincher's Fight Club, Mary Harron's American Psycho, Gaspar Noé's Irreversible, dreadful movie. They're ultra-violent, hyper-masculine, and usually involve some weird psychosexual hang-ups. And they exaggerate all of these characteristics to a degree that is surreal and fantastical, and that gives the movie a certain schizophrenic quality. Looking back, I think this brand of edgy was very much just coming into fashion at the time. Movies were daring to deal in more offensive content, both viscerally and morally, and audiences were liking it. It was fresh. I can vaguely remember the way it felt fresh at the time, but revisiting these kinds of movies now, after a couple decades of being exposed to edgy stuff, it definitely doesn't feel as shocking or interesting. It's not necessarily bad, it's just kind of tiresome. Of course, it didn't help my viewing experience that Invisible co-host Aaron is very much not a fan of this type of movie and has never gone out of his way to see them. The whole time we were watching Oldboy, I could hear him grumbling to himself, "This is so stupid. This is so ridiculous. What's the point of this? Who even likes this?" I knew he was going to hate it, so I'm not the least bit surprised. It's just funny to witness in real time. He had a lot to say about it, and I kept telling him, hey, this is the perfect opportunity for you to come on the program and put in your 2 cents, because nothing is more fun than hearing someone talk about something they hate. But despite being an articulate guy and a good public speaker, he maintains that he is too shy to have that kind of conversation recorded. That's all right, though, because I also have fun keeping my show to myself and keeping him mysterious, so he will have to remain invisible. One interesting observation Aaron had that I do want to relay is that this movie read to him like a violent version of Jean-Pierre Jeuneau's 2001 movie Amélie. I think this is probably because he's always avoided watching Fight Club and the other movies belonging to that category of purposely violent and offensive boy movie for boys. So his point of reference is instead the big indie movies of the time that also incorporated a level of surrealism, like Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So although his comparison seems odd, it makes sense. Instead of going the really gritty noir route, Oldboy does more often opt for a bit of the whimsy that was so popular in movies at the time. Come to think of it, Aaron ended up watching those movies because of his high school girlfriend, and the only reason I saw all these horrible violent movies was because I watched them with my high school boyfriend. Go figure. I really feel like I got the raw end of this deal. I wish I could have dated a girl instead and been spared from boy movies. But going back to Oldboy, we were both kind of stunned to see it met with such critical acclaim. It's commonly regarded as one of the best films ever made and has made it onto a lot of best of lists by different publications over the years, including The Guardian, who ranked it 3rd best in modern South Korean cinema in 2020. Some consider it a cult classic. Certainly, there's something to be said for a couple of particularly unique scenes in the movie, including a fight scene that takes place in a corridor just after Odae-soo finishes interrogating Mr. Park. In one continuous take lasting roughly 3 minutes, he's shown taking a beating and a CGI-generated knife to the back, but ultimately overcoming the dozens of lackeys that come for him with his fists alone. It took them 17 tries over the course of 3 days to get this take right. And although a couple of scenes involving hallucinations of ants were clearly computer-generated, it's notable that actor Choi Min-sik really did eat a live octopus for the scene in the sushi bar where Dae-soo meets Mi-do. In fact, he ate 4 of them before they finally settled on the right take. You've got to respect the guy for doing all of his own stunts. Actually, I think the success of the movie hinges quite a lot on Choi's performance. Not only was he able to successfully act out drunkenness, but he was also convincing when he was acting hysterical. I'm not an actor, but just based on how many people I've seen fail to do it right, I think acting drunk or acting crazy are probably a couple of the hardest things for an actor to do. He was also able to pull off what I think was a very balanced performance of a guy you can sympathize with and find utterly repulsive at the same time. Even though he's as much a victim as anyone, the movie does a good job of reminding you just how bad of a person Odesu is at the same time, how barbaric and morally repugnant. Instead of being a straightforward Kill Bill or John Wick type scenario where the main character carrying out their revenge is clearly wronged and clearly justified, in Oldboy you find yourself thinking, maybe this guy deserved it. The key question it ends up returning to is, even though I'm no better than a beast, don't I have the right to live? Honestly, in my opinion, no. But I guess some other viewers might be more willing to entertain the notion, and for them, that probably imbues the movie with a bit more depth than your average revenge fantasy. For me personally, revenge as the main premise of a work tends to fall a bit flat no matter what. This might be because I've read Shakespeare's Hamlet too many times to feel moved by any other representation of revenge. The message Hamlet delivers about revenge is just so complete that anything else I read or see about it feels like a bit of a joyride. Of course, Hamlet is only one of the great works towering over the entire history of English literature, so I'm aware that's a very unfair comparison, but it's something I can't help thinking about any time revenge comes up. It's not that I think Oldboy is a bad movie, and like I said, I can understand why it was well received within the cultural context of the early aughts. I think the reason Aaron and I struggled to enjoy it, besides the fact that it's just not our genre and the content is just so gross, was because it represents something that was on trend when we were kids and adolescents. I think that has the effect of making it seem especially dated to us. Even though it's only been 20 years, it feels more like a million years have passed, because that's around the time we were just developing the level of awareness needed to come out of our small child's world and enter into the larger culture around us. So since the movies that came out during this time are among the first adult things we absorbed from our media environment, and our tastes have evolved such a great deal since then, I think that contributes to making it feel extra far away. It seems so ironic that I've been able to analyze and enjoy so many movies that came out long before I was born, and yet it's the ones from these eras that tend to stump me the most, because I was there for them, and because there were people around me enjoying the movies that I would then associate with them. I guess it just goes to show that nothing ruins your ability to be objective about a movie quite like having watched it with those obnoxious boys you knew back in high school. That's all I have for you guys today. I'm Hanna Belinsky. Thank you for tuning in to Retro Reels, and I hope you'll join me again next time on another look back on the way things were.